allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much for coming. We had an executive session on January 6th to discuss personnel. Additionally, we met tonight prior to the meeting to discuss legal, such as Link, Delaney Construction, and Rouse. We also discussed internal investigation. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, A through C?
Can we separate out
Separate C? Absolutely.
for further review with Jack?
Yeah. So a motion to approve A and B on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And then we agree to postpone C until a further date.
We get a motion to table C.
You sure can. Can I get a motion to table C until next month?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, confirmed appointment. Very exciting tonight. We are here, obviously, there's a few guys in uniform back there. We are here to promote Detective Tui. Regina, if you want to come up with Chris. Yeah. Chris, Virginia, you guys can arm wrestle it over, however you want to do it. Sure.
Good evening. I'm pleased to be here tonight to request that Officer James Tui be promoted to the rank of detective. As recently as early 2022, the police department had been operating with a single full-time dedicated detective, Detective Bell, with the assistance of Lieutenant Brown, who handled both administrative and investigative responsibilities. Criminal investigations have become more complex and demanding due in large part to technology. Plus, the demands for investigations in general have increased. Patrol personnel in general cannot dedicate the time to in-depth investigations. In 2021, I started the process of creating a criminal investigator position in the Criminal Investigations Division. The position was created as a lateral assignment, not a promotion, to assist with the influx of cases and help reduce the burden to Detective Bell. Officer Tui was selected and has functioned in that capacity since March of 2022, nearly 3 years now. He has the same job responsibilities as Detective Bell. Officer Tui has been with the police department since January 2017. He has done an excellent job with both basic and highly technical investigations. Officer Tui has demonstrated his dedication and aptitude for this position. I'm hereby requesting the board promote Officer Tui to the rank of detective effective immediately. If the board is in agreement with the promotion, I would request that it be approved by general motion of the board. I have Magisterial District Judge Regina Armitage present to perform the swearing in, and Jim's wife Ashley and their two sons, Bryce and Xander, are here this evening as well. So with all them here, there's no pressure.
Well, great. Can I get a motion to promote Detective Tui to his new position?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I will gladly second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. You're up.
We'll hear it. Hey, how you doing?
How are you?
Good to see you. Oh, sorry about that. I'm not that level down there. Really not. There you go.
Hello, everyone. I'm District Judge Regina Armitage. Most of these guys are on the map are familiar with who I am. I didn't realize when I committed to doing this tonight that I would be a little hoarse, a little low on the vocal cords due to last night's game. And I'm so happy. so happy. And the cheering's not that frustration. It's just that way to go burn. So we all have to look forward to it, right? But it's a good day for you, and I'm thrilled for you, thrilled for Ashley and the whole family, and you absolutely deserve it. So it's my honor sent it with you, picture of the family. Okay? All right. And I'll issue the oath of office. I, Detective James William Toby Jr. Do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution and laws of this Commonwealth, and the laws of Hilltown Township, and that I will uphold, obey, enforce the law, and discharge the duties of my office with fidelity, without consideration to a person's race, color, sex, religious creed, sexual orientation, age, national origin, ancestry, handicap, or disability, as a police officer and detective for Hilltown Township, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Congratulations, Detective. All right, everybody. Like I said, it was an honor. Happy New Year. And God bless.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Take care, everyone. Go Birds! See you guys.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
That went good. That was cool. Actually,
All right, we'll just wait for those doors to close.
watch the train car, please.
Yep. Well, that was great. I think we should start every meeting with something like that. That's fantastic. So back to confirmed appointments. There are some appointment corrections that were from last month. Apparently, the dates were incorrect. So I'll read them briefly, and then what we'll do is we'll have a motion to approve all of them. So the corrections are Carol Pierce to the Planning Commission, term ending 12/31/28. Eric Nagami to the Planning Commission, term ending 12/31/28. John Rankin, Water and Sewer Authority, term ending 12/31/29. Matthew Knox, Zoning Hearing Board, term ending 12/31/27. As I said, this was a mistake last month. We're just here to correct it. Can I get a motion to approve B 1, 2, 3, and 4 as one?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
I will second.
All those in favor? Aye. Additionally, last month we neglected a gentleman. So we have a new appointment, Steve Kendra, to be appointed to Park and Rec with a term ending 12/31/29. Can I have a motion for that appointment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Caleb.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, planning.
Thank you to all of them.
Yeah, appreciate it. To you, Tim.
Okay, the first item under planning is the Telford Borough Authority Well House Number 6 Land Development Waiver. This was before our Planning Commission last Tuesday night, at which time the Planning Commission considered the proposal of the applicant to waive the land development process for construction of a 36 feet by 22 feet filter building on an existing property owned by Telford Borough, which already contains their utilities for their water system within Hilltown. The information that was provided is that the authority needs to construct this facility to house some treatment apparatus that will effectively meet the coming mandates of the EPA for water quality. So here tonight is Pat Duganji from CKS Engineers. He's the authority engineer. The plan was the land development waiver was recommended for approval, conditioned upon the January 9th, 2025 review letter, and also the township receiving confirmation via the authority that PP&L, who has an easement over the property, that the authority work is permitted within the easement as it's currently shown. So, Pat, I'm going to ask if you have anything else you want to add to that before the board considers your request.
Good evening. Nothing really to add. Tim summarized that well. It's a 22 by 36 foot building housing a GAC treatment for PFAS. It's at the Authority Well 6. The drawing up on the screen in the turquoise color is the existing treatment facility. In there's arsenic treatment currently. Outside the building, between that turquoise colored block and the dark blue block is a VOC stripping tower, and then there is the darker blue or brighter blue, which is our proposed building, which houses the PFAS treatment. And as Tim had pointed out, the Planning Commission had recommended a waiver of land development. I'm requesting that here this evening.
Okay. You have any questions?
I do not. That's very straightforward.
Yeah, it seems pretty straightforward. Can I get a motion to waive land development plan conditioned upon completion of items contained within engineering review dated January 9, 2025, and we'll add receiving confirmation from PPL that proposed improvements may be located within that utility easement.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Okay, then we are on to the next item under planning, which is the Suburban Equities Roman numeral 3 LLC land development. This project was also before the Planning Commission both in December and also last Tuesday night. And at last Tuesday night's meeting, the Planning Commission considered the proposal that was before them for a land development to construct a 2,017 square foot warehouse building on the property along Bethlehem Pike, which is zoned in the HI zoning district. Just to remind the board, this project also previously went through conditional use approval that the prior Board of Supervisors did grant a few years ago, and also the applicant did receive some variance approval from the zoning hearing board. So here tonight is Mr. Van Louvenet representing the applicant. The Planning Commission's recommendation, just so I can be complete on that, was to grant a preliminary approval subject to compliance with the items within the November 18th, 2024 review letter. They also did make some recommendations on waivers. I'm going to let Mr. Van Louvenet go from here, and he can make his presentation.
Thank you very much, Tim. Tim and I have had an opportunity today to go through his review letter, and we are prepared, we meaning myself and Mr. Haas, the project engineer who has been with this project since the beginning when Carson came forward for the zoning hearing board and handled the engineering aspects of the conditional use hearing. Mr. Metzinger, I know you weren't here, but I assume you probably familiarized yourself with the history. Yes, I thought so. So that'll save us a few more minutes. What I like to do normally, and I think Tim had agreed with me today, is rather than go through his letter, which is a long letter, but it's primarily a recital of history to a bit large extent, and the waivers that have been requested. For the board members who participate in the conditional use proceeding, I think you all know this site is a heavily wooded vacant piece of property. That was the reason the zoning hearing board saw fit to grant the waiver to permit some additional tree clearing. And we have believed that at this point the plans satisfy the conditions of conditional use approval, which were the subject of the two hearings that resulted in the decision. And I think the board would probably agree with me that a number of the issues that were discussed at preliminary or at the conditional use hearing are issues that ordinarily might be part of the planning process. In this case, the plan's been pretty well vetted, in my opinion. There are only 3 issues in the review letter. I'd like to say I know that any motion that you make tonight would be contingent upon compliance with the Wynn Associates review letter. So of the discussion items in that letter, number 5 is the only one that I think bears some discussion and perhaps a conceptual approval by the board. That is the concept of reserved parking. There are no known tenants for this project. I think that was also the case of conditional use, and for that reason, the board imposed a condition on conditional use approval that the conditions would be binding on any subsequent owner or developer or lessee. The concept here is that if 140 parking spaces are not required, that's how many are shown on the plan, and different users would have a different requirement for parking, the parking tabulations would only indicate that 82 are required. The concept is that we would grade the site out, prepare the area for all the parking spaces, and install a minimum of 82 up to the number of spaces that the actual user wanted to develop, so that they're all there. The 140 could be developed, but the developer would only be required to develop 82. That's the concept. I think that could be handled in a condition of an approval that Jack could certainly draft for us. And if it's a concept that meets with your approval, the idea would be that if we don't need that additional impervious surface, we won't develop it. And that, I think, that's the only one that I think bears some discussion. If you disagree and you want to discuss any of the other issues under discussion, we're happy to do that. Sean has an encyclopedic knowledge of the plan by now, and I think he's more than capable of discussing it.
John, before you proceed on anything further, just to give the board a clarity on the reservation idea, that was broached by the Planning Commission initially of the applicant. And as John mentioned, the applicant seems receptive to that idea. The one thing I want to clear up, though, is that the stormwater management facilities that are proposed on the site anticipate the full construction of all the parking spaces that are on the plan. And even if they were to reduce the number of parking spaces being constructed, they would not be changing the stormwater design. So the stormwater design would effectively be over-designed up until all the spaces would be built. So there is no relief being given to the applicant for stormwater management. They are still proposing the full-blown stormwater design that's on the plan. They're not going to get any benefit of reducing the number of spaces from a stormwater standpoint. So just so the board's aware.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I should have mentioned
That's
that.
okay.
Then there are a list of a number of waivers, and I think most of those waivers are what I would put in the category of technical engineering type waivers. The 2 that I believe required discussion are waivers F and G on page 3 of Tim's letter. Waiver F is a waiver from the requirement that sidewalks be installed along Bethlehem Pike along the frontage. This was the subject of discussion at the Planning Commission meeting. As the board probably knows, in the vicinity of this project, there are no sidewalks on either side. I understand to the north of this project, the board has granted waivers to previous projects that have been developed from the requirement to put in the sidewalk. And to that extent, if the board prefers the waiver to the sidewalks, we did show curb and sidewalk on the plan. My client is willing to accept your recommendation for waiver if that is your preference, rather than constructing the sidewalk and the curbing. And at that point, we would understand that the board's practice is normally to require a fee in lieu of the construction of those improvements. Your ordinance, to my knowledge, doesn't have a procedure or standard for the development. So what I would propose is that if the board is willing to grant the waiver, it will be subject to an agreement being reached between the applicant and the township engineer to be brought back here for your approval at a subsequent meeting. We're hoping to get a recommendation for approval tonight, But I think, Tim, you and I talked today, we kind of agreed that it would be appropriate we could come back and get your blessing on that condition before the plan is recorded and development agreements are prepared.
Right.
And the other one is one that, frankly, I have a little trouble even understanding your ordinance. I've read it. I've read a lot of ordinances in my time, but the shading requirement in your ordinance is pretty complicated, and not sure I even understand it all. But in this case, what we are asking for is a waiver from the requirement of 50% shading for parking areas. The parking areas are proposed to be shaded to 14% of the impervious area. 17 additional trees would be required to provide the waiver or the 50% shading on the car parking area. We're asking for 100% waiver of the requirement to park what I'll call the tractor trailer parking areas. Frankly, we can't figure out how anybody could ever do that. You need much larger spaces, you need turnaround areas, and putting trees that grow 25, 35, 45 feet in the middle of those parking areas just doesn't work as a practical matter. There is no exception in the ordinance for areas like this, parking, loading areas, that sort of thing. So that becomes another discussion item. Besides which, in this case, there really isn't, well, as you know, this site is already heavily wooded. We've got as many trees on this site already as we can. We have beefed up the buffering in certain areas in order to try to put as many trees on the site as we can put on the site. To the extent that we can't, again, my client is willing to consider a waiver of the requirement. You have I think the ordinance says 50%. The board can accept a waiver or a fee in lieu of trees on the shading requirement of 50%. That's my recollection of the wording. And again, if the board sees fit to grant that waiver, I would ask that we the same understanding that the condition be imposed or the waiver be granted in the written approval, subject to the condition that we negotiate the appropriate fee with Mr. Former's assistance, coming back for approval of the board if you see fit to do that. The final discussion item, I'll call it a discussion item, is I would like to request, and we made this request to the Planning Commission. They didn't approve it, but ultimately it's your call as to whether to approve it. We requested a preliminary final conditional approval here. Reason for that is this project has been pretty well vetted. We've gone through that. We filed the preliminary land development plans last spring, following the zoning hearing board variance relief, the conditional use approval. Before we even went to the Planning Commission, the plans were revised. Tim issued a second review letter, which is what this is. This is not the first review letter. We already had a chance to look through the other ones. We believe that we're really at a point with this plan where the open items are going to be administrative. They're going to be, Tim's going to look at his review letter. He's going to make sure that we've met the technical requirements. And we think they're all matters that can be handled administratively. We don't believe that at this point there are really any planning issues left, assuming that the board sees fit to grant the requested waivers.
So one other thing to add, and I was remiss when I said about the Planning Commission's action. One of the things that the Planning Commission's motion included was, as John alluded to with the waivers, the Planning Commission did endorse approval of all the waivers, excepting the waiver of the shading of the parking lot, which is 7G. And the other aspect of the waivers that the Planning Commission weighed in on was that any capital contribution that would have been approved for the waiver of the sidewalks, the motion was that the Planning Commission preferred that money be used on site by the developer to plant more trees. So just giving you all that information so you have it from the Planning Commission meeting, because I know it was recently held and you don't have the minutes yet, but that was the motion.
And we'd like to plant more trees, but we frankly don't think we have any room to plant any more trees. Would you agree, Sean? I mean, you know, there gets to be a point, and I think all of us to some extent are kind of minor arborists, but if you plant trees too close together, they don't live. I mean, it doesn't make sense to plant more trees than is appropriate. And we believe, with the assistance of the landscape architect who designed the landscaping and assisted Sean, that we have as many on this site as we can put. There was no attempt to skimp in that regard. It's already a wooded site. We put the trees everywhere we can to provide additional buffering around the site that to the extent that it doesn't conflict with the project. And for that reason, although I understand that what the Planning Commission wanted is a standard request in many cases, in this case, I don't think that request really fits. And we'd be happy to put the fee in lieu or as a capital contribution, perhaps to a better cause, whether you have a traffic improvement that you'd like to make, something along those lines. That would be fine with my client. Again, subject to us negotiating the appropriate fee with Mr. Fulmer and the board.
John, in looking at the plan, you're also basically unable to put any more trees on there due to the location of the basin there. Can't plant trees in the basin, then you have that easement, utility easement that runs across the front, right? So there's a lot going on your site.
That's correct.
Am I correct in looking at taking a look at those plans?
You are correct. We have buffered the basin to the extent we can.
But you can't go in it.
We can't go in it.
Right.
That's right. And there are, as I remember from reading the zoning hearing board decision, there's about 3.5 acres of easements going across this site that we can't touch, and they reduced the site area so that the variance, but for those easements, we would have complied with the impervious surface and all the other ordinance requirements.
And in looking at it, it looks pretty heavily wooded in area. It's got trees.
It still is heavily wooded. That's correct. There are a lot of existing trees on there that we're not trying to remove, obviously.
Okay.
Just what is necessary. I mean, this is a type of use that does require a little bit larger expanses of paving than we have shopping center. You can put this parking spaces in the ordinance when you have all cars parking, but it's still a requirement. You know, a lot of owners don't really like to see a lot of trees over the parking area. They shed, they drop branches, they drop leaves. I mean, I didn't draft the ordinance. I see you've had it for about, 16, 17 years now, but it's tough for me to figure it out.
I have a question, if I
Go ahead.
may, John. One of the conditions of the conditional use approval, condition 17 speaks to the installation of enhanced landscaping along Bethlehem Pike outside the PP&L easement. Is that what your engineer was referring to a moment ago?
We have put as much as we can along Bethlehem Pike. Am I correct, Sean?
That's true. Yeah, so we're meeting the landscaping requirements for the site. We've added landscaping to the building at Bethlehem Pike. We're meeting the street tree requirement. Basically, we've added as much vegetation as we can without it being detrimental to the long-term growth and stability of what's out there.
Right, because as John was saying, you put too much in, it ends up dying anyway.
Kill each other.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I have, Caleb. Joe?
Yeah, so I know I'm jumping in a little late on this, so we're gonna have to start all the way from the top.
Sure. No problem.
No, I'm kidding. Just out of curiosity, what kind of tenants are you envisioning?
To my knowledge, we haven't really started to market yet. We have to wait, just as Carson said during the conditional use proceeding, until we have a project, and nobody signs a lease before the project has land development approval. I mean, you really can't even go start the search at that point.
Right. Significant leasing experience? Are you the okay.
Mr. Ginzer's one of the principals in Suburban Equities.
Gotcha.
We just didn't get that far into the process, but some end user type business would be in there, we would assume.
Okay. Probably a question for Tim, but in 7E it mentions drainage improvements along Bethlehem Pike. What would those be?
Well, if there were, right now there's roadside drainage along there. If there was some curb or something that was going in, or some Sometimes you would have to put storm sewer or whatever in. The bigger item in that waiver is the surface improvements to Bethlehem Pike. But it's a state highway, was recently overlaid, so when that waiver was considered by the Planning Commission, they didn't see any reason why the applicant would have to redo that because it's relatively new. That requirement's really to try to fix something that needs fixing as part of the development and or improve the surface of the road. And in both cases, it didn't seem logical for this applicant to have to do anything there.
Got it. And so for the sidewalks, we still would need a fee in lieu of determination. That's correct.
Yeah, what I would recommend, and what we've done as a matter of practice here for years, I guess I would say at this point, is we would have a cost estimate of the waived improvement provided by the applicant's consultant. It would come to me for a review just from a standpoint of checking all that, and then it would be brought before the board at a future public meeting, at which time the applicant could come to the meeting and you could review that and decide on what the fee would be with the applicant's agreement, and then that would be what it would be.
And that would be put into the development agreement at the time. Yeah.
Okay. And then on the trees, so between the fee in lieu of for the sidewalk and the tree fee in lieu of, would there be any opposition from your side on how if you gave the township the ability to decide how to utilize that? So for example, typically for trees, we would have to plant more trees, but there's a need at the intersection of Keystone and 113 for a traffic signal.
I think that, frankly, I haven't talked to my client, but I thought when Tim mentioned that to me, I thought that was very appropriate. In fact, the project might even benefit ultimately from that traffic light. So I thought I always prefer to give it to a specific purpose if we have one. So that's certainly acceptable.
No issue doing something like that. That was pretty much it.
Do you mind if I jump in?
Go ahead.
I read that at the Planning Commission, you received preliminary approval. You were looking for a preliminary final, correct?
I didn't handle the application, but I did ask my associate who handled the Planning Commission meeting to make sure that he requested it, although my experience is that's usually a supervisor issue.
Okay. Tim, it's my understanding that, for lack of, that's not a birth rate. We just don't give that to people. My thing is, and again, I'm talking to the group here, most, if not all of the heavy lifting is done for this project, correct? We're virtually there.
Well, so what I would say on that question, because it does come up quite frequently from boards about whether or not it's appropriate. So it's solely your decision on that. I don't know, John would agree to this, but there's really no hardship to say we need a preliminary final. But John's point, I believe, is that the project's gone through a number of iterations with different reviews and so forth, and they're at a point where they believe that the planning issues have been largely addressed on the plan in terms of the building's not going to move 50 feet away. It's not going to be substantially different than what you're seeing already on the plan. It's just a matter of going through the technical things yet that need to be addressed. And what I say to people when they ask me is I have to do the reviews regardless if it's a preliminary final approval or a preliminary approval. I'm going to review the plan again. And I'm going to review it any number of times until it's 100% complete, all those conditions have been satisfied, and it can be recorded. The bigger issue is does the Board of Supervisors need to see this plan come back before it again for a final approval? Are there issues that are outstanding at this point that you might believe you need to see again in terms of a planning issue or a decision you want to make or defer to final? And that's really your decision, because I can't tell you what your concerns are. You're going to have to decide that for yourself. But my suggestion is if this board doesn't believe that there's anything substantive on this plan that they need to see again in terms of another iteration of a review or whatever to come before you at a public meeting, then if you're comfortable with that, you could grant a preliminary final. I'm still going to do my reviews regardless of what kind of approval you grant, because my job is, as a township, is to go, township engineers, to go through this plan with a fine-tooth comb and make sure all those conditions have been addressed before it's going to be brought for you for signature and recording.
So let me play devil's advocate.
Yep.
So, and I'm not saying your client would do this, but say it comes in and something substantial has changed on the plan. At that point, then you would come to us and say,
What I would say is if there's something substantially different with the plan, let's say the number of parking spaces increases, decreases, the building size, shape, or whatever changes, or the stormwater management design is completely different, that is not what you approved as a condition.
Okay.
So that would have to come back before the board
Okay.
and be reviewed as a amended or revised plan. Or revised.
Absolutely.
So then,
What
if I
you're
can jump
asking,
in, John, if the board decides to give preliminary final, they're not jumping a step. You're still going to do everything that you are supposed to do,
It doesn't
right?
change
it doesn't change anything that you
what
do.
I'm doing.
Okay.
It's just really what
Okay.
your interest is in,
Okay.
in seeing the plan again and again and
Cut you
again.
off. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, John. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, all I was going to say is you're giving approval to a certain set of plans subject to conditions. If we change the plan, if I change the horizontal geometry, we're back again, we're back to the planning commission, we're back to you. What I'm saying is the planning issues were addressed by to some extent by the zoning hearing board, who put parameters on, by the board, who put the parameters on the conditional use. All of it are based on the same plan. The plans, the preliminary plans that are in front of you were the same plans. They've been more fully engineered that you saw at conditional use. I mean, everybody's seen these things a number of times. It's just, I think it's not necessarily a wise use of public time or resources. We still are going to pay Tim to do what he has to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll still have to approve the development agreement when we come back to you with the escrow. So
I just wanted to make sure that nothing was getting sized, so it's not.
No.
Everything is going to, okay. That's what
From
I
my
wanted to know.
standpoint.
I figured that was the case. Thank you.
Okay, so on number 4, the plan identifies type 1 buffer yards where the site abuts existing residential uses and type 5 buffer yards around the perimeter of the proposed parking lot. There's really only one neighbor on this property. I don't know if it's considered residential or not. It happens to be a machine shop. What buffer is along that?
It was the buffer yard that was proposed in the plan was in deference to the residential use of that property, because there is a mixed use there. There is a residence and there's also a commercial or / industrial use there. But the buffering requirement of the type 1 buffer was for the fact that there was a residence there.
Right.
So the applicant did propose that required buffer yard per your ordinance for the, and in fact, it's along the entire property line, if I believe I'm correct on that, Sean, if you want to clarify that for me. And the other aspect of it is all the parking lots, regardless of any abutting uses, all the parking lots have to be buffered along their perimeter. So it's kind of almost a double buffer between the property line buffering for the neighbor and also for the parking lot buffering. Sean, if you want to.
No, thanks, Tim. Once again, Sean Hosling, an engineering, civil engineer for the project. Deanna, if you could show PDF 4 from our slide deck, I think that would show this the best. But as Tim mentioned, we have a type 1 buffer. That's the residential buffer. That's along the southeastern property line. At a certain point, the use becomes it becomes a different use, and then it's a type 5 buffer. Along the northern edge, you can see we're not proposing any vegetation up there, but we're allowing all the existing trees to basically, in effect, meet that type 1 buffer requirement. There's some very substantial vegetation up along that area. It also has some implications associated with utility easements, the PP&L easements, sewer, AT&T. We don't want to impact that area. And any additional trees that we add up there would be an impact to those easements. We're leaving that as is. On the west, once again, we have the type 1 or the buffering on that edge as well.
So,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
So you're not saying it's a type 5 off the parking lot and then it goes into a 1, are you?
No, I think the way that the ordinance reads is if the higher, we'll call it the thicker buffer, the type 1 buffer would reside. So where both are required, the southeast corner, we're proposing the type 1 buffer, that's 35 feet. In the other areas where we have the parking lot, it's the type 5 buffer, it's 15 feet.
Is there a berm in a type 1?
No, I believe so.
Won't be burned because of the existing trees.
I don't believe there's a berm requirement.
No.
No.
It's just a whole lot of trees, deciduous, mixed with evergreens, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy mix of deciduous and evergreens, and also some shrubbery and ground cover.
Okay. On 7G, did I understand you correctly that you said, obviously, shading trees where trucks are parking and turning around don't make a whole heck of a lot of sense, but were you saying you would do shading where the cars are parked?
We do some of the shading, we're still asking for a waiver. I think we calculated 17 additional trees would be required. We put them in the places where they're logical in my opinion.
Yeah.
And those 17 are strictly for shading of the car
17
parking.
would be only for shading, yes. All the other, as Tim said, we buffered the parking lot, the perimeter, the way the ordinance requires. We're not asking for any waiver there.
Yeah, and as you can see on this plan, so obviously the car parking is south of the building, the bottom side of this plan. All the curved islands that we're proposing to have a street tree in there, those street trees play into the percentages, the 50% requirement. There's some calculations involved with an exhibit within the township code, but those are the trees that we're proposing there. The property line, which I think is a more beneficial area for the actual buffers, where we're putting the additional buffering trees. So you have the parking lot trees within the shading requirement, and then the buffering trees to meet the buffering requirement.
On the truck parking area, and I know what John said, but just from a hypothetical standpoint, if it were possible to plant trees to meet the 50% requirement, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you had offered this figure up at one of the Planning Commission meetings, but wasn't there about 75 trees that would have been necessary if you were to do the math of the canopy area based on the impervious coverage to meet 50%? I think that was a number that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I wrote it down, so I don't think I made it up somehow.
So we did the calculation in the background in prep for this meeting. We have it at close to 90. So we have it at 90.
90, okay,
yes.
all right.
Okay. What else do I have here? So Tim, I know, there's other steps to this, but our traffic study was included in this plan.
Right.
Is it complete?
Your traffic engineer reviewed it. PennDOT is also reviewing it, or has reviewed it. Your traffic engineer did offer a review letter from November the 12th. Our traffic engineer had some questions, but for the most part, they were satisfied with the results of the study. There were a few things they asked for to be added, just to have completeness in the study, it looks like to me, but I don't know that there was anything in here. I guess I'd ask the applicant if you want to speak to that, the traffic engineering review.
Yeah, I can speak to that. We also have Brianna Pampucci, she's one of our traffic engineers on the project. She's here, can speak to some of the traffic impact study questions. But generally, we have the Heinrich and Klein comment letter, November 12, 2024. There's no significant comments there. It's all will comply. It won't drastically change anything associated with the development. And then I'm not sure of the PennDOT date of the last review, but once again, it's basically pared down to minimal comments. There's nothing significant outstanding. So when we do resubmit back to the township, we're planning to submit our highway occupancy permit application, just because we're in a good spot with PennDOT in terms of the TIS.
Yeah, and at that point, a copy of that would be sent to your engineer too. I mean, obviously PennDOT usually looks for local comments, but in the end, PennDOT's going to have the final say here.
Yeah, I'm glad, because when I read this, all I got was more information, backpedal. So glad PennDOT's involved.
Well, and any comments that PennDOT would, but ultimately we have to address PennDOT's comments too. And
I'm sorry to interrupt, but one of the things that was brought up at the Planning Commission meeting, because I know there were some concerns about whether or not there would be any, because the tenants are unknown, so you don't necessarily know exactly the usage of the site at this time, because until there's tenants, you don't know how many trucks, you don't know how many cars, that sort of thing. And am I correct in saying that in PennDOT's view, and their requirement is that there's such a thing called a condition statement that the applicant must sign off on, and in the event that anything changes in the parameters of the project, that they have to go back to PennDOT. Am I misstating that?
That's correct. So the condition statement will be a recorded condition statement with PennDOT, and once they know what the tenant actually is, they'll have to confirm that what the trips that were in the condition statement was what that tenant will suffice, and if it's different, they'll have to provide a different, more traffic analysis for that.
All right. And if the tenant changes, do they go back to?
Yes, yeah, that's all part of the, that's why the condition statement is part of that, so if it's
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I don't remember where I read about the lights, and forgive me, Jack, it's in the conditional use that we had, but if you don't have a tenant assigned, how do you know that they're not going to be working nights there? You just tell them that it's not available for them? Because I know the lights shut off at a certain time.
Mr. Torres, I'd say simply put, it was in the conditional use decision letter. I believe the lights have to be off between 11 and 7.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you lease space to a bakery and they want to come in at 4 a.m., there's no lights for them.
They would have to come, my view is they would have to come back and ask for an amendment to the conditional use approval and explain to you why they needed it. Because otherwise, the condition is that this has to be provided to a tenant, any subsequent owner, and they're all bound by it. So it would require a change in conditional use. There's no question about that. And you would have the power to consider it and approve it or not approve it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, if I may, to John's point, that is condition number 22. Applicant should provide all tenants, any future owner of the property, with a copy of the conditional use decision. All tenants, any future owner of the property shall be subject to terms and conditions of this conditional use decision.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why.
I assume that was the case. I just wanted to
No,
have
no,
it
no.
on the
That's
record.
the protection you have. We'd have to get a modification of the conditional use if there was a tenant who didn't like the conditions.
Yep. And again, Tim, it was in our packet, so I'm going to bring it up. Bucks County Planning Commission suggested alternative forms of energy generation for this project, solar and things like that. Did you guys consider anything?
I mean,
I know
ultimately,
it's way down the road and everything, but
yeah, I mean,
it's in our
ultimately,
packet. I got to ask the question.
anything
I may
like
not see
that
it
is going to
again.
be up to a future tenant. So, you know, whoever comes to a deal to purchase and utilize the property, if they want to look into solar panels on the roof, you know, they certainly can. I mean, I've been involved with a lot of these projects in PA and the surrounding areas, and I don't see it too often. So probably not, but it's something that they can consider.
Okay. I had to ask. I may not see you again. So. Joe, anything else?
So is the plan to sell the building or lease it? Because the way you just described that kind of implied to me that you might be selling it.
Yeah.
Depends on, you know, whether, you know, the end user or whether, you know, there's rather than that.
Okay.
Some companies prefer to buy, some prefer to lease. I mean, that's
Right.
But no matter what, they're still
bound by your
bound
They would
by
still be-
those conditions, correct?
correct.
Okay.
On the parking, the difference between what the requirement is, 82 versus 140. If I heard you correctly, to the extent you won't need the 140, you wouldn't develop that.
It would be graded out and seeded, so that it's ready to go if there were a change in tenant, for example. When the first tenant said, I only want 82 spaces, and develops the 82, the next one wants 120, they would have the ability under the approval to do that because, as Tim said, the stormwater management facilities are already sized.
Right.
But
We did that. I'm sorry.
I was going to say on that question, Joe, what we usually do is that there is maybe a written agreement, reserved parking agreement, if you will, so it gives the applicant and the township the ability individually to require those installation of those spaces or implement those spaces. So for example, if the applicant knows they're getting a tenant that's going to need more spaces, they can do that at their own discretion. But if for some reason the township determines that, you know, they didn't build these spaces and the applicants, they're parking on the grass or out in the road or whatever, and the township zoning officer goes out and says, this is not going to work, the township under that agreement has the ability to direct the owner to make sure that those spaces that are needed are built.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
It's not a one-way street, it's
Right.
a two-way street.
Right.
That's been the way I've done them for many, many years now, and I don't have any problem with that. It's usually part of the package that comes at the time we do the development agreements. We do the reserve parking agreement, and Jack and I can work that out with Tim and my clients. I have had cases where the township has come back and said, hey, build 20 more spaces. I mean, it makes sense. And again, Tim, I think we need to do that. We would have to come back and I'm assuming to get a grading permit, and it's not without township review. There are permits that would be required. Conservation district approval, places we have to grade again. We'd have township permits to get in order to add parking spaces.
Yeah, and usually the area that they're grading off and they're stabilizing in some kind of pervious cover at this time, you're not going to be allowed to put structures in there or other things that are going to prohibit them in the future if they have to building those spaces. So it isn't like that area becomes out of play in terms. Well, it is like the area comes out of play from, but it's not like they can use it for something else because now they want to build another structure or something of that nature. Now they have a bonus area that they can work with. They can't because that area has to remain available for those spaces.
Right. Got it. Okay.
Okay. Anything else, Joe? Jack, Deanna? Now or never.
I just, I don't know when we approve, if we'll be addressing the fee in lieu of for subsequent. I just want to make sure that we capture.
I think we'll put that in the motion.
Yeah. And you want to ask for comment?
Yeah, I thought we'd make the motion and ask for public comment.
Yep, there you go. Yep,
Okay.
it's appropriate.
Okay. So can I get a motion for preliminary land development approval upon completion of items contained within engineering review correspondence dated November 18, 2024, with additional capital contribution determination for sidewalks and trees at a later date? I know what you want to do. Go ahead.
What?
You want to change the final too?
I do. I want
Yeah,
to change the
that's
preliminary
absolutely
final.
fine.
I do.
Yep.
You don't agree?
No, that's fine.
Oh, okay. I would amend the
can-
motion to include that, considering everything has been done and we're ready to go.
So I'm fine with it. Yeah.
Okay, second. All right, before we vote, I'd like to open it to public comment. I know some folks are in the room. If anybody'd like to come on up for public comment on this issue, feel free. Okay, all right. Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you all.
Who made the motion?
Thank you for your time. I guess I do because I amended it.
Do you want to do that over with the amended?
No, I just wasn't sure if someone actually made the motion.
Consider I made the amendment to preliminary final. That becomes my motion at that point, right?
Was it seconded?
Which Joe
Joe
seconded.
seconded.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. I just want to make sure so the minutes reflected correctly.
Yeah. No, just making sure.
Better to double check.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't want to have to come back next month again.
Okay, are we
Yep, back
ready
to you,
move?
Mr.
All right, the
Fulmer.
next item under planning is the front porch co-housing. The folks that are here tonight had met with staff about a month ago to talk about a proposal that they'd like to discuss with the board. This has to do with a particular use that currently we don't provide for. And I'm going to let them explain their proposal. And there's no review letters per se on this, but there is information in your packet. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
Well, thank you for your time tonight. And when we decided to go all analog, I failed to send the images that are on these poster boards, although I think you have them. But so my name's Jim Richardson. I am co-founder of Front Porch Co-Housing, but more importantly, I'm the father of a 30-year-old son with autism that lives with us, and he will until there's someplace else that he can live safely. And I'm here with my wife Nancy and with the other part of our team, Joyce and George, and Steve is somewhere. But we're here for preliminary perspective of what our goals are for this particular parcel. So tonight I'd like to talk about the what, bring you up to speed on who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and where, which the easy one is where is 1411 Route 113. right up the street. What I'd like to do is give you a perspective of why we're doing this. Currently in Pennsylvania, there are no communities that are neuro-inclusive by design. So I want to talk tonight about autism, intellectual and developmental disabilities. And if you think of that autism and IDD, so for tonight I'm just going to refer to it as autism because it is by far the largest portion of that segment. It's like an umbrella where autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, TBI, ADHD fall as structures under that umbrella. And some of those individuals are neurodiverse, meaning their brains work differently, like our son Michael, as with autism or ADHD, while others face physical challenges. So it's a combination of ADD or autism and IDD. And these differences typically present from birth. Our proposed community is intentionally designed to serve both the neurodiverse individuals and neurotypical individuals. The way I'll present that to you is my wife and I just moved into Regency at Hilltown in March. It is an intentional 55+ community. We want to do that, but for a combination of adults that can live there, but also adults like our son, who today have no other choice. So think Regency at Hilltown, intentional community, but for adults with and without neurodisabilities. Based on the PA census, there are more than 3,000 adults receiving services, 3,000 adults with autism receiving services in Bucks County. That's the ones that Bucks County knows about. And there is a limit to the number of services and the dollars that can get doled out by the state for services for these adults. So Bucks County knows of 3,000. And these numbers are only going to grow. Each year, another wave of young adults with autism ages out of our school district. It's commonly referred to as falling off the cliff. The state allows, and I think that the government allows, for kids like our son to go to school for 3 additional years so they can get the education they deserve. But when they do graduate, they're done. Fall off the cliff, school district wipes its hands of it, and they become the sole responsibility of the parent. That number from the PA census in 2014 also projects that by 2030, 5 years from now, that number will increase to 4,300 adults like our son receiving services in Bucks County. If you extrapolate the portion attributed to Hilltown at about 2.5%, because the national average is 2.5% to 5% of adults in the population have an IDD. That would mean that in Hilltown Township today, there are over 500 adults of that number in Bucks County living here, living with aging parents like ourselves. Without appropriate housing options, many adults face certain housing instability when aging out of support system or losing family care. Right now, these adults, like our son, have 3 options. They continue living with aging parents and caregivers, such as ourselves. They bounce around from siblings to other family members for short-term viable housing options when mom and dad are gone, or they live in less than ideal settings like group homes, which personally I find deplorable. Every day, parents struggle with an impossible choice: keep working well past their normal retirement age to support their adult children and worry about where they live. These young adults want to work, they want to have friends, and they want to contribute. And someday, if you're in Weiss, you'll see a very happy young man, our son Michael, working at Weiss. He's picking up carts or he's loading groceries in people's cars, but we're fortunate that Weiss gave him a job. Hilltown Township has already demonstrated that it understands how thoughtful housing solutions strengthen the community. When you welcomed Regency at Hilltown, you created a thriving intentional community that keeps seniors local and enhances the township's character. We think you can do this again. Now I'd like to turn to Joyce.
Thanks, Jim.
So I'll talk a little bit about the site plan. The neuro-inclusive community that we're proposing, I believe it's in your packets, is located, as has been described, on Route 113, Souderton Pike. It's less than a mile from the intersection where the Weiss Market and the Wawa are located at the intersection of Route 313. We're proposing 7 residential buildings and 1 common building, like a clubhouse. The residential buildings each have 9 units, and the common building has 2 units. The buildings all surround a common green space that serves kind of as a shared yard for the residents. Will have pedestrian walkways connecting the buildings in and around the green space, and we envision it to possibly have, a vegetable garden, play area for outdoor games, gazebo, picnic areas, the kinds of things you would want to have in a kind of park-like setting. And the site plan itself for the community, has lot coverages, landscape buffers, building heights, and density that's similar to other parts of your zoning ordinance. While the development on this parcel would require zoning approval, we believe that this plan will be in keeping with the rural nature of the township. And just to walk you through the site plan, the entrance off of Souderton Pike leads to a ring road, which connects all the buildings. The vehicles access the parking that is between pairs of the buildings. The residential buildings each have 9 condominium units and a shared common area. So they have 5 units on the second floor and 4 on the first. They are 1 bedroom, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units from approximately 900 to 1,600 square feet. They will all utilize universal design principles, have accessible features that's appropriate for the residents who live there. There's a porch that connects the pairs of buildings that open out into that central green area. And inside the porch is that common area that's in each building, which is kind of basically a living room, dining room, where residents might have a meal together or play a game or watch a movie or something. The common building, it has shared spaces that would be used by all the residents in the community, like a fitness center, game room, multi-purpose room. And it's important to front porch co-housing to make the homes as affordable as possible for both the short and long term. So these buildings will be highly energy efficient for long-term operational sustainability. And with accessibility built into a supportive community, it will enable all of the residents, no matter their age or ability, to remain there longer and perhaps well into their old age.
Would you mind just taking the images and turn them around? We have it in our packet. So
Sure.
that way the audience can see it.
Thank you.
So one of the other things, a couple things that aren't in my notes, but I do think are important for you to be aware of. Today, we have 175 families who have signed a letter of intent that they will buy a unit if we can build it. 175 families today, and we're only going to have, if our plan comes to be, about 30% of these units carved out and deed restricted for adults with IDD, because the parents, like ourselves, want their children to live in as intentional and typical community as possible. So imagine 30 units carved out of Regency that were for adults like our son. That's what our goal is here. These will be purchased units, not rental, because the other fear parents have is if you rent a home and then the landlord changes his or her mind, A, they can raise the rent, or B, when the term's up, they can replace them with somebody else. These 30 units, the 30%, will be deed restricted, and when a parent has to sell for whatever reason, our intent is that we'll only be able to resold to a family with another child with an IDD. So I want to be clear about the reality we face. Our current system is failing adults with autism and their aging caregivers. Without communities like ours taking decisive action, we're looking at a looming crisis of displacement and institutional care that will tear families apart. With the 3,000 adults with autism in Bucks County today growing to 4,300 by 2030, and 70% of those living with aging caregivers, the need is clear. But within this crisis lies an opportunity. By supporting neuro-inclusive co-housing, you're not just preventing a crisis, you're strengthening the entire community while demonstrating forward-thinking leadership that attracts new residents, investments, and quite honestly, a larger tax base. Tonight, we're asking for your support to move forward with the appropriate changes that will allow us to create Pennsylvania's first neuro-inclusive community right here in Hilltown Township. These families are looking to us for leadership and hope, and we are looking to you for your help in making this reality. And I'll leave you with this thought. If not here, where? If not today, when? And thank you for your time. And I'm open to any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions, Jim?
I do not. Very, very well thought out. I appreciate this information. I honestly was not aware. And I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry about that. You heard me.
I did.
At least I hope
I
so.
did.
You heard me, right? Thank you.
Joe?
I think this is pretty awesome, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
I serve on the board of a nonprofit called Horizon House, based out of Philadelphia, that does work for, has IDD services, mental health services, things like that. So something I've definitely spent time focusing on, and I think it's a great idea and a great thing that we should consider. And I don't know if it would be most appropriate for if something like this would go to like the planning commission, or
that actually is a good segue into a couple of my questions.
Sure.
So the design for this, you mentioned this would be the first of these in Pennsylvania.
Yes, sir.
Is there a model, or is there examples of this type housing in other places that you're,
There are.
Would you be able to provide us with some of that? Because we may get a feeling of what works, what doesn't work, what might work here better than.
I certainly can, and in your handout there is a graphic of the U.S. with little call-outs.
Call-outs.
Yep.
Those are the other communities in the country that are doing things similar.
Thank you, Supervisor Metzinger just pointed it out, so I missed it.
I will also say, I'm sorry, Jack, Mr. and Mrs. Richardson had provided a much more extensive plan during our PSA meeting. We had requested that it gets scaled back just for a better consumption.
Right,
so we do have that, the bigger plan.
All right. Yeah, because I would like to get at least an idea in my head of how it would look from a zoning perspective. I mean, do you know in these other areas, is there typically an adoption of a new use type, specifically this type of housing, or does this use type get sort of melded together maybe with other uses?
Not necessarily. I think it can be as like a planned use development.
Could you please speak into the mic? I'm sorry.
I haven't done extensive research, but I believe that they can be like a PUD or not necessarily. I mean, it's really housing. Who lives there is it's part of the plan for this this group to have these units be deed restricted, but I don't think that the zoning necessarily has to talk specifically about the neuro-inclusivity in the zoning ordinance.
The site that the applicant here, or the folks here are targeting, is in the rural residential zoning district. So that is your lowest density, and most of the township outside of your urbanized areas is rural residency. So unfortunately, other than single family home and some certain cluster type single family developments, it doesn't provide a lot of opportunity for, say, maybe this type of housing. So one of the things we talked about at the staff level meeting was the potential that we would have to, if the board was interested to provide for this use, we would have to look at our ordinance very closely and see how this could be integrated into your requirements to make it a viable use for the township, and also to, work on the aspects of zoning that you always have to consider, in terms of how does it integrate with other surrounding properties and buffering and traffic and all that stuff. And that's we're very early in this process,
Yes, we are.
obviously, but the idea for them to come before you tonight was to gauge your interest in whether or not you wanted to even start that process, because the staff, we can't speak for you, and obviously this is your chance. If you're encouraged by what you hear and you want to see this move forward, then the next steps would be to share that information that Jack was referring to as far as some of the zoning information and so forth, and we would have to start looking at that. And we would obviously want to work closely with our planning commission and everybody to try to proceed with something that's well crafted and also meets what they're looking to do.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep.
So I also have a comment. My friends up here at the board and friends in the audience know this, but I have a 15-year-old son that has severe special needs, nonverbal. Yep. And I think what you're doing is very honorable and noble, and I will do everything in my power to help you guys make this happen.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
My name is Nancy, and I am the mother of a 30-year-old autistic son. When Michael was finishing high school, we started looking at options. That's what led us down this path. And we have personally visited a lot of those places in your packet to see how they did it. And we're finding that families are the ones that are doing this. They don't have a choice. They have to do this. That's why this is happening, and this is becoming a very popular way of finding a place for our children to live once they outlive us, around the country and even around the world. We're seeing more and more families really generating these kinds of communities up themselves. So we appreciate the time and your consideration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions before we pack our bags and let you be with the rest of your night? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, engineering none, unfinished business. Go ahead, Deanna. Do you want to say something?
Mrs. Richards, you can leave them. I'll get them. It's okay.
Thank you.
Engineering none, unfinished business none. New business, motion to approve 5-year contract for new permitting services. Deanna, you want to take that away?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This motion is to approve a 5-year contract for new permitting services through Spatial Data Logic. We had presentations a month ago of the 3 options that we were looking for a new softwaring system for permits. This software we felt really encapsulated everything that we were looking to do with our new software, expanding services and capabilities to improve the public interface and community experience. And we are looking to fully launch this new permitting program throughout the year in 2025 and get things going at a pretty quick pace to help improve those services immediately for residents.
Great. Can we get a motion to approve 5-year contract for new permitting services to Spatial Data Logic? Is there a motion for that, gentlemen?
So moved.
All those in favor?
I'll second it.
Oh,
I'll second. No, he made the motion. I'll second his motion.
Joe, seconded by Jim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Sorry.
And if I may say, good job on taking the time and vetting. And I know I'm speaking on behalf of all 3 of us. Nice work.
Thank you. All right. Item 8B, motion to approve 3-year auditing services contract. We had 2 responses to our RFP that was posted on PennBid and in local newspapers. There was a substantial difference in cost with no real variance in service. So we are looking to make a recommendation for the auditing services for the contract years 25, 26, and 27.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve 3-year auditing service contract for 25, 26, 27?
Go ahead, John.
My preference actually is to defer to February, if we can, for some further evaluation.
I agree.
Okay, can I get a motion to table this until February?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Items 8C, 1 and 2. Item 1 is to review and advertise with amendments ordinance number 1987-002 for well certification for private water supply. Our ordinance is no longer consistent with the county's requirements for testing as they changed their ordinance in July. We are unfortunately just finding out about these changes and would like to evaluate and amend our ordinance to be more in line with the county's new ordinance. So we ask for a motion to draft and advertise for that update. Would you like to do these both at the same time?
We could. Sure.
Okay. For item C2, ordinance number 2016-004, vehicles and traffic. This ordinance is used in making snow emergency declarations and general emergency declarations, as well. We would specifically be looking to make amendments to Schedule 1 and Schedule 7 to make modifications and better post on those streets that are identified within the ordinance for such emergencies to increase safety and make our roadways a little more clearly defined to our residents as well.
Okay. Is there a motion to
Draft.
draft and advertise ordinance 1987-002 and 2016-004?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Discussion for future quarterly treasury reports. Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman.
Vice Chairman. I asked this to be put on the agenda. As you know, when we hired Deanna, she is a doctor of numbers, for lack of a better word. She's very astute in the financials of the township, treasurer's reports and things like that. And I think the fact that we've got, we're on the web and people can see see a lot more and open things up more to the township. I would like to have a discussion or an agreement that, if we're all in favor of it, I think a quarterly treasurer's report Deanna could present, put it up. I think it's a good thing to let everybody know where we stand on a quarterly basis with respect to our budgets, spending, so on and so forth. That's simply what I'm suggesting.
Okay. Joe, any comments?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. One thing, and we have to talk through this, but just for everybody's information, we will have to take a look at how we present that because our budget is on a cash basis.
Correct.
But I think it's a great idea to.
And that's what Deanna is going to handle.
Absolutely.
And I know you could too, Joe. I recognize that.
I'm all right.
Yeah, you would do it. But she's our treasurer, and I think that I just think that's a good thing to keep everybody on the same page moving forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We need a motion for that, or we can just make it happen, right?
I don't think you need a motion, Mr. Solicitor.
Well,
if I promise to do it, well, that's
motion can't hurt.
All right. Is there a motion to provide quarterly treasurer reports in the future?
I will make that motion presently.
Presently, make that motion. Is there a present second?
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, discussion for agenda additional timetables.
Yeah, I asked that to be put on the agenda. I think we need to come up with some sort of a game plan with respect to when material can be added to the agenda, and that's, we're no more. So that would be like the Wednesday before the Monday meeting, the Thursday before the Monday meeting. I think that way we all have time to digest everything. And again, if there's an emergency or something that needs to be added to it, I understand that, but I think with the general items and things like that, I would like to see, a certain deadline and then nothing else is added at that point. And I would turn to you because you're the one who's going to have to turn the packets around. And Jack, any comments that you might have regarding, time to take a look at what's in the packet?
Well, and bear in mind, there is statutory law on amendments recently, last few years, Sunshine, which talk about things that can be added to the agenda within 24 hours. So
Okay.
there is that out there already, but I
Okay.
think what you're really talking about is establishing a protocol in terms of this is the time, the deadline point in time where this has to be done, this has to be reviewed, it has to, go a regiment. And I think it's a good idea because then everyone knows what to anticipate. And then particularly you three as the elected officials get a chance to look at everything and know, okay, that's the
digest it.
final product.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if anybody wanted to add anything to that or had any other suggestions, please, now's the time.
I do like receiving our packets on Thursday, just to enjoy my weekend with it. So perhaps Wednesday should be the cutoff, Wednesday at noon or some time that works for everybody.
What's your thought, Deanna?
I think if you like to get them on Thursdays instead of Fridays, then we would shoot for Wednesday at noon. That would be appropriate now that it is a bit of a tight turnaround time.
Yeah, what
I'm
about
looking
Tim?
at you.
Tim, is that too tight
I
for
work
you?
for you. You tell me what you want. I'll work all night.
You could also bifurcate it. You could everything but engineering.
Yes.
Engineering and planning. There'll be a preliminary packet with that. Tim's
He's not that
material is
special.
going to be Tim's special. But Tim's material is going to be Tim's material. It's going to be review letters
Right.
and letters to the planning commission with some exceptions. We get into like MS4, the stormwater stuff, but.
I would say this from my perspective. I don't think Wednesday is a problem for me to meet. The only time it would potentially be a crunch is if we have to move the planning commission meeting to Tuesday,
Okay.
which only gives me less than probably 12 hours to turn around and get you something. So
That's no problem. If I have the packet on Friday, I can still enjoy my weekend with it.
all right. I don't want to ruin your weekend.
So we're just saying Thursday then?
Yeah, then I would say Thursday at noon if Friday is okay.
You like that?
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Good with that.
The only other thing, and I don't know if we need to necessarily talk through this up here, but maybe it's Deanna and Jack and Tim, if you could come up with a recommendation for how we can streamline the materials in an appropriate way that we could post them on our website so that people can have access to them
Prior to.
yeah.
And obviously, Jack, and I'm not speaking on your behalf, but we'd have to, any personal item, things like that would have to be.
Yeah,
So you would vet it.
Yeah,
Take a look at it.
I would envision
Indiana.
a similar procedure. What we do with Right to Know Act requests is that Deanna takes the first look at it. I take a second look at it. We hash out anything that we feel needs to be redacted or can't be disclosed because of some rule of law, and then out it goes.
So that would take some time.
Yeah, I still think if we have all the materials Thursday
That's enough time.
by
That's enough
noon,
time?
we should have enough time.
Yeah, because we know it's coming. I think that's that helps.
It does.
It's not.
Yeah, because Tim's
It's
stuff
not
is
an unpredictable
pretty much the
time
same.
period.
Right,
It's the same
right,
time
right.
period.
I'm
I mean, I don't mean
100%
to speak
favor of
for
that.
the
No, no.
manager, but
Mm-mm. That's spot on.
That works.
Yep.
I'm in favor of that, 100%.
Okay. Well, we can put it in the motion form here. Since Jack likes that.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
It might be flexible.
I'm not. Yeah, this. I mean, I'm not sure.
Can't hurt.
I hate to sound like a contrarian, but I'm not sure if this requires a motion, only because it's not about.
I want to know. I want to see tourists do it. I want to see him come up with this.
This is a discussion about internal procedure and how we want to.
Right.
But we wanted to have it in public for the benefit of the public. I think that's fine.
All right,
Okay.
so Thursday at noon.
Is the goal.
Is the
There's
goal.
our goal.
Got it.
Okay. Supervisor liaison program.
Yeah, so this was, and actually, I have two things on here. They're kind of related. So last year when we established the liaison program, one of the roles that I took over was for fire, and I know Caleb, you're with police. I was going to, just based off of my involvement over the last year and interest level, wanted to see if you guys were open to, rather than a fire liaison, more just emergency services in general, EMS, emergency management, and fire. You can keep police.
Well, to be honest, Chris runs such a tight ship over there.
Right.
And Deanna on this end, I mean, I just sit there.
There you go. So I
want that.
I just there's just there seems to be so much overlap in the, especially with EMS and fire, that I don't know. I know that we voted on it and formally set up the program. Hence, maybe this is worthy of a motion.
To amend and to add.
What Jack says.
Yeah, probably just because I think we did all this by motion.
Yeah.
The first time?
Yeah.
Sure.
I would be remiss if I don't ask. I know that the liaison program was established in the absence of a manager. Now that I am here.
You are still the main point of this is just to give actually I don't think it was established in the absence of a manager. I can't recall, but the intention was just to give people somebody on the board either direct access, or just make sure there's board involvement in each of the areas. But the manager would still run point on pretty much everything.
Do we, any type of meeting like that, do we want the manager involved at this point? Do we want to turn any of this over to the manager?
Well, I think the manager is the point person. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Manager should be at all meetings.
Yeah, like the way that I think about it is I wouldn't have a meeting without Deanna there. Deanna is going to have tons of meetings without me there. It's just a matter of when or if I need to be involved or want to be involved. That was kind of the idea behind it.
It's the board's decision.
Do you want to? We can mull this over.
Yeah, do you want to mull? We can mull it over.
Yeah, I think I still don't. I don't necessarily see why a liaison program would be necessary.
Okay.
To be honest, only because if there are certain areas of interest for each of the board members that you would like to participate on on the meeting, obviously, I will be reaching out if you make that known. Yeah. So I'm not sure if a liaison program is necessary now that there is a manager, but if, of course, it's up to the board to determine whether or not the liaison program should continue.
It's all right with you guys. I think I'd like to mull that consideration over.
Sure.
Yeah.
Not a problem with that.
So we can table this until.
Yeah.
Fine.
Oh yeah, I don't have a strong
Yeah.
preference either way. It was just since it was in place. The last item that I have here is more just an ask for Deanna on the fire side. Back in 2007, I think we had an evaluation performed to take a look at the state of Hilltown fire services, and I forget the organization that we went through, but based on where things are currently in the state of fire and also EMS, but I think it would be good to take another look at that and refresh that report, or explore avenues to get kind of a comprehensive look at where we stand from a fire standpoint.
It's blowing my mind. You're right. We did do that.
Was it an economic development thing?
Yeah, but that report's been brought up before.
Yeah,
I don't think that's. I don't think it's a bad idea.
So I don't know how it was coordinated in the past. I know you have tons of experience with that. So I just wanted to see if that was something that you could get the tires kicked on. And
I can, definitely look into that and see what needs to get done to get that moving.
Awesome. That was it.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, manager update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 2 items under the manager update. First is the resignation of elected auditor James O'Brien. This resignation is required to be announced and included within the minutes. The county has been notified and the position will be on the ballot in 2005. The second item is an ARPA recap report. All of the spending for the full amount of ARPA grant money has come to a conclusion. Everything needed to at least be obligated per the regulations and requirements of the grant by December 31st, 2024, and they have all been obligated. So I wanted to circle back to a presentation that I gave, I believe it was in October, where we announced what the plans for the remaining funds within the grant were to be used for. And this was the original estimate of what we were looking to budget using that grant funding. This is the final figure of the updated breakdown. So we have had some changes, as you can see. The infrastructure improvements, public building improvements, and stormwater management upgrades are the primary sources of spending. So we really had a strong effort to put the funding back into the community and have those grant dollars working for our residents in ways that would be productive and in ways that we felt would be utilized by the greater scope of our community as well. So for infrastructure improvements, those types of projects include roads and bridges, and those projects do extend into this year. Now, for those unfamiliar with ARPA, the funding is able to be utilized through the end of 2026. So the obligations have been made for certain projects, but some of this funding has not been expended yet. So we do anticipate that for this specific item, for infrastructure improvements, the spending will be completed by the end of this year. For public building improvements, for the township building, many of you may already know, but we are going through a renovation. We did hire a design team, Phillips Donovan, to start that renovation design. So big components of the renovation include health and safety updates, as well as ensuring that the facility is ADA compliant, which unfortunately at the present time it is not. As well as ensuring that we have room to grow. Obviously, the community is continuing to prosper, and we want to make sure that our municipal building reflects that and that we can accommodate as many people as necessary within our building. And then the last is stormwater management, and a good portion of those were MS4 upgrades, and the bulk of those upgrades were already completed. Thank you.
Awesome, yeah.
Well done.
It's fantastic. Okay, moving on. Supervisors' comments. So I know we're always giving shouts out to the road crew, and I'm going to do it again because this last snow event, they were on top of it.
They were.
The way my house is situated, I live on a corner, and they plow the snow onto my property, and my bedroom window is 19 feet from there, and they were plowing all night, so I can attest to that. They were doing a great job. So,
Is that a backhanded comment? Or?
just testifying. No, they're great. They did a good job during this snow event. So
I have none, Caleb. I have none.
Just a small one. Just want to thank Deanna and Chief Engelhardt. Friday night, I bothered them with there was somebody raised a safety concern on 113 at Keystone. Didn't have a barrier up, and people were kind of driving straight through the construction zone. So I kind of bothered them on Friday night during my pizza run, and I don't know, it must have happened pretty much right away. I think Public Works went out, but Chief took care of it, and as of yesterday, I saw a barrier there. So just wanted to say thanks for jumping on a Friday night, and sorry for the text.
Great, thank you. Public comment. Come on up and tell us who you are.
How's it going, guys? Most of you might know me, remember me, Tyler Coleman. Own the property at 330 Progress Drive, and was trying to get Pat's attention before he left. Not entirely sure what was going on. The building he's putting up for the well, I know PFAS is huge at Quakertown. Was actually going through it, but for future land development, I know we own about 5 to 6 acres in the back. You know what I mean? Does that affect or anything like that? And access to the well is another question I have.
They're not changing their access that they use today to get to their well, so they're not proposing to encroach on your property, if that's what you're wondering.
No, yeah, I know that. Yeah, that.
You can come on up and tell us who you are,
Brian
too.
Coleman.
Don't know.
We're my
No, they're our brothers.
Yeah, no. I just was curious too about the whole bridge situation. If they do decide to condemn that bridge, what is the process? Because if they're going to be building and nobody can go over it now, and we're going to be bringing stuff over it.
Yeah, that's a question you're going to have to direct to Telford Borough because it's their access. I mean, the township, nobody's approached us about any changes there. That, you know, and at this point, it is what it is, I guess.
So when they fall through, they fall through.
Well, like I said, it's we don't control their access. They have access the way they've taken it, and if there's a problem with the bridge, they're going to have to address it somehow, and that's not really in our wheelhouse to deal with at this point, unless they come to us and say.
And they have to work with us for
right, and they have to work with the neighbors. Sure.
Okay. All right.
Yep. I would talk to Pat and Telford Borough and see what maybe they have a contingency on that.
Okay.
Yep. Sure.
Thank you, gentlemen. Anyone else, public comment? Okay. Seeing none. Press? No press. Motion for adjournment at 8:38.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all.
Sitting through that longish meeting.